How is it like to live in space, spend over a year in space? We have India's second astronaut, Gaganyatri, going to the International Space Station very soon. Let us try and understand how is life at the International Space Station and how is life on Falcon 9 Crew Dragon. And who better to explain it to us than astronaut Thomas Pesquet. Namaskar. So nice of you to speak to me once again.
Very happy.
He has flown to space twice, person who has deep experience of the International Space Station. How is it like first going into space on a rocket?
Well, first going into space on a rocket is very impressive, obviously. It's a sensory experience. I would say just getting on the elevator to get on top of the rocket, you get an appreciation of the size of those machines. You only see them from a distance, but when you see them from up close, they're as tall as several different buildings, like put on top of one another. And then you get on top, you look down, you see the cars that brought you, they're very, very small. Then you step onto the rocket, it's very calm, very quiet. You do the last final checks, fuel the rockets, remove the crew access arm, and then you hear the countdown and you blast into space. Almost 9 minutes of acceleration, very dynamic, and then it stops. You're weightless, you're floating around the Earth. It becomes so smooth. It's like you're floating in a cloud like in your dreams.
Is it very risky?
It is risky. You know, it's you have a lot of speed, a lot of altitude, a lot also of chemical energy with all that propellant. So yeah, it is risky, but it's controlled. You know, all the engineers at the different space agency, they make sure that it's very safe. So I always think that between the astronauts and the dangers of space, there's more than just a sheet of metal, which is the side of the spacecraft. There's actually thousands of people who are trying to shield them from all those dangers. So you feel confident most of the time.
And you've flown both the Soyuz systems and the Falcon 9.
Correct.
What is the difference?
So first of all, same principles, right? Space is the same. The physics are the same. But the
escape velocity remains
escape
the same.
velocity is the same. So basis, the fundamentals are the same. I'd say the Soyuz is from earlier times. And the Falcon is more modern. So you got digital screens. It's very sleek. And Soyuz is more from the 70s. But actually, I like Soyuz a lot as well because the reliability is very, very high. They have many different systems, many different backups, and it's not as comfortable as the Dragon. It's smaller, it's more cramped, but it feels good to fly in both.
Which was better for you?
Honestly, for my knees, because I'm a little bit tall.
I know.
And having my knees folded in the Soyuz was very painful because you're strapped really tightly in your seat for a long time before launch and after launch. So I think the Dragon was more roomy, but what I really liked in the Soyuz is there's two different volumes, right? There's the one in which you sit for launch and landing, and then there's another one on top of it, a round shape that you can open a hatch between the two. So it gives you more options to sleep, to have some privacy, to do everything you have to do. Dragon is just one volume, so it's a very common shared experience between the crew members.
I can understand. Now, how is it like when you go in for the docking at the International Space Station? Is it again a tricky operation?
It is a tricky operation. You have to be very, very precise. Those are vehicles that are flying at 28,000 kilometers per hour, right, roughly. And you have to control their relative velocity in a very, very tight manner so that you don't impact on one with the other. And so this is all very, very dynamic, very controlled by the engineers at the control center. But from the crew perspective, you've been launched, you see the emptiness, the vastness of space, and then you see your target, you're getting close, and then you realize how big and huge the space station is. It's really magical. It's like a castle in the sky. And as you get closer, you see the complexity, you see the sheer size of it. It's really, you have to force yourself to sometimes look at your instruments rather than just looking at the space station. But it feels really good to get there, to have that contact, hear that sound, and then, you know, equalizing the pressure, opening the hatch. You know, it feels like you've made it to your destination.
And how does it feel like entering the space station after the docking?
It's a good moment. It actually takes a lot of time once you've docked to do the second mechanical link. The first of all is just a small docking, then you have to equalize the pressure. You wait for the temperatures as well to settle. It takes a lot of time to do all the checks. sometimes 45 minutes, an hour and a half. And then you can finally open the hatch. You hear your colleagues, they're knocking on the other side of the hatch. That's how you communicate. Knock, 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 and then you answer. And eventually you open and you enter a new world. When it's the first mission to the ISS, it's pure craziness because it's very three-dimensional. In a Soyuz or in a Dragon, it's very small. So you've been used to some amount of weightlessness, but you're not ready for what comes in the ISS. And then you're being shown a huge ship. It's like discovering a new world. How does it feel
when you hear the ring of that bell?
Yeah, the ring of the bell is a tradition. They don't do it all the time because it comes from the Navy. So when there's Navy astronauts with a Navy background on the ship.
That's why they did it for Sunita Williams.
Yes, exactly. They use it all the time, but sometimes there's no Navy astronauts and they forget the tradition, which is bad. But it's always funny to hear that bell for arriving ships and departing ships as well.
Wonderful. Let's spend some time understanding how is life at the International Space Station. Indians have no experience about it. Let's start with the basics. What do you eat there?
No.
And how do you eat in weightlessness?
So the funny thing is life in weightlessness is not hugely complicated, but it's different. You have to relearn how to do simple things like sleeping, doing your hygiene, or eating. And eating, for instance, everything floats, right? Everything is in free fall, that's weightlessness. And so you cannot put anything on the table, like it would float again. You cannot put your spoon on the table, it would float away. So everything comes with Velcro. And sometimes we even put tape on the table so that it sticks. And you would be opening a can. All the food is in canned or in pouches or dehydrated foods. And then you prepare your food like you would a meal. You're asking your crew members what they feel like eating. Sometimes you prepare for them, sometimes they prepare for themselves. And then you have your own spoon, eat your food, always hold your packet, your pouch, or your can until it's over. And if you stick it, you have to make sure it sticks. And the beginners at the beginning, it's always fun to see them eat because it's hard to control. Things like rice. I mean, imagine rice. It goes everywhere. And then as they're trying to catch the bits of rice floating away, they send even more rice away. So sometimes there's a bit of a catastrophe. But that's how you learn. And then you get used to it. Sometimes we even have some special food for special occasions like Christmas, birthdays, national days, things like that.
So does one person cook or everybody has to make his own meal? Or is it a shared experience? Because you follow London time or Greenwich time and the space station, do everybody have a meal together or how does it like?
No, it depends. We start the day at the same time, we finish the day at the same time usually. The lunch break can vary between everybody's different schedules. So it's more like the evening meals that we share together. But the portions are individual. The packaging is always individual so that you can cook your own can or your own pouch and then somebody else can choose something else to eat. So at least once a day we make a point to be all together to cook different types of different meals that we share, but the rest of the time it could be you just have 15 minutes, you're heating something, you're eating it, and then you go back to what you were doing.
Now let's get back to early in the day. Mm-hmm. How do you do what we do every morning, which is to go and do your ablutions? How do you do that? Because on Earth it's easy, everything goes down.
Absolutely.
So how does it happen?
Well, so for
how do you urinate and how do you defecate?
So there's different systems, right? Obviously, it has to be figured out by the engineers. But there's a toilet on the space. There's several toilets on the space station. There's depression, aspiration with a fan, and then everything goes down, gets sucked down. That's how it goes. And then for your hygiene, there's no running water, obviously. So we use wipes, wet wipes, dry wipes. We also have wet towels. Put a bit of soap, put some water on the towel, and then you can.
So there are no showers for you?
No, unfortunately
no bathtub?
No bathtub, no showers.
No spa?
No spa, no, rough conditions.
Very rough, I must say.
I know, that's the price to pay.
So 6 plus 6 months and no bath. Did your family take you back?
You get used to it. You're actually very clean. That was one of the questions I had. I thought, you must be pretty dirty when you come back, but you're not. First of all, because there's much less
perspiration,
dust and perspiration and things in the air. It's much more controlled, so it's a clean environment. And second, also because the wiping yourself with wet towels and etc. works really well. So you come back to the ground, you take the first shower, and the water is not brown. It's actually pretty clean.
Okay. So what happens? How do you aim? How do you do the morning stuff? How do you aim where you have to shoot in the morning?
It's you get used to it again. You stabilize yourself like everything you do in weightlessness, right? If you try to use your arms and your legs at the same time, it's not going to work. So you have to stick your legs somewhere, grab something with your arms, and so that's how you do it.
And if you dirty it, what happens?
Well, you have to clean up after yourself.
There are no janitors there.
No. It's all on us.
It's solenness.
Yeah.
And how do you brush your teeth?
Brushing your teeth is the same. You use a normal toothbrush, normal toothpaste, but except you don't have running water once again. So the best thing to do is actually you swallow the toothpaste at the end, and then that's the easiest, cleanest way to do it.
But that's what mothers told us. Don't swallow your toothpaste.
I know.
Dentists also say that.
Yeah.
So you seem to defy everything which is done on Earth when you go there.
Like I was telling you, living in weightlessness, there's new challenges, new ways of doing things.
Wonderful.
But you could do it for at least 6 months and you're in good shape, I can tell you that.
It takes 6 months to get used to
No. But I mean, you can swallow your toothpaste for 6-7 months and it'll be fine.
And what do you do with your clothes? Do you change your clothes or do you wear the same clothes? What happens?
No, you actually you keep your clothes for some amount of time, which is pre-calculated because of the supply that's needed accordingly. And then when you've been wearing it for this amount of time, you just throw it away. There's no way to wash it. It's actually more economical to fly some new clothing and keep them for as long as possible rather than.
So what do you do? Open the window and toss it out?
No, it'd be
what
nice.
Do you do?
It'd be nice. No. What you're doing is the same for everything on the ISS and for every space station. The volume is limited. It's like a submarine, right? You cannot open the window, and so the vehicles that bring our cargo up, there's also the ones that bring our trash down. So you take the cargo in, you put your trash in bags, in containers. You're doing it very cleanly, in a very controlled way. But that's your only option. And then those vehicles go and burn up in the atmosphere in re-entry, and that's how you get rid of your trash.
And is it correct that astronauts drink their urine or purified urine, what is called yesterday's coffee is today's coffee? Is that a fair statement? Is that how it runs and how does it feel?
Yeah, it's 100% correct. We have a water reclamation system which works really well. Our water is actually cleaner than normal tap water on Earth because it's filtered and it's purified so much. But yeah, it's everything that the perspiration, urine, all the liquids, they are being recycled and then you drink them again as potable water the next day. You can't feel the difference. If nobody was telling you, you wouldn't even notice. Obviously, it's just normal water, cleaner than on the ground.
Were you trained for that on Earth before you went up, or did you have to experience that when you went into space for the first time?
No, you're not trained for this. You know, there's some amount of things that you can be trained for. There's some amount of things that you cannot really be trained for, like how to dry your towel or where to find a good spot to hang your dirty clothing so that it dries after physical exercise and things like this. You have to figure it out, right? And that's why the expertise and the experience of your fellow crew members is so important, because they would tell you, look, this is how people have been doing it most of the time. You get those 2 or 3 versions, but you know, this is what I'm using, etc., etc. And that's how you learn, and that's how you transfer that knowledge and pass it on to the next one.
You don't toss into another crew member's bunk.
No, you're trying not to do that, because that would be frowned upon, you know, living for so long with the same people in the same space.
And do you get lonely when you're at the International Space Station?
You know, not really, because, so first of all, there's always a handful of us at the same time between all the different agencies and the different nationalities. So my second mission, the minimum was 7 crew members. So that's actually a lot of people. My first mission, the minimum was 3, which at the beginning I thought was going to feel a little bit lonely, but no, it was also a good break from you know, the hectic life when there's so many people around, 7, 11 crew members. And you have so much work, you know, 12 hours and a half every day, plus, you know, taking pictures. You're so busy that you don't have time to think too much, which is good. You want to be busy in those environments.
So what do you do there? What work do you do?
Oh, on the space station.
Are you looking out?
No, unfortunately, first of all, there's very few windows, and then there's no time to look out. Every day you've got 2 hours and a half of exercise and maybe 40 minutes for a lunch break. The rest of the time is just work. It's 12 hours and a half work days. I'd say 30% is maybe maintenance and logistics, 30-40% maintenance and logistics, and the rest is just research. You would be working on many different research experiments, from fluid physics to biology to anything you could possibly think of that, you know, takes advantage of the conditions of space, including weightlessness. And so it's actually a ton of fun because you would be sometimes the guinea pig for a biology experiment, and then you would be working on combustion physics or fluid physics on the same day. So that's also what makes space, I think, exploration exhilarating.
What happens if you have an argument with somebody, or you have a disagreement with a crew member, or if you have a fight with a crew member? What happens?
Well, we'll try not to have fights, but you can have disagreements.
You can't box somebody in space.
Well, we'll try not to, but yeah, that would be pretty extreme. I don't think it ever happened. But first of all, because we're selected for this to be team players, you're trained for it. You know your crew very well. You train for 2 years, 2.5 years with them. And then, people are easygoing. I've found that it's a very nice population to work with due to the selection and the training. And, last resort, if there's a disagreement, there's always a chain of command, right? There's a commander on board the space station, and whatever he or she says is going to be the final word if it comes to this. But most of the time, it doesn't have to.
And how does the air get circulated?
Oh, so it's actually a good question because on the ground you've got convection, right? So for example, the oxygen is heavier. So in a fire, you're being told go look for fresh air down, and the smoke will go up. That doesn't happen on the space station. So the gases don't mix up. But what the result of this is that you can have a pocket of air and a pocket of carbon dioxide and a pocket of oxygen, and they wouldn't mix up. So if you're going from one volume to the next, you could have different gas compositions, which is not great. So we're always forcing ventilation. There's always fans going on everywhere on the space station. That's also why it's so loud, because you make sure that the air is always constantly recirculated. One good example is when you would be sleeping, then you're creating a pocket of CO2, right, by your respiration.
Sure.
And so we sleep under a fan. In each crew quarter, there's a fan, and you cannot switch it off. It's actually forbidden. You couldn't even switch it off. If it goes off, if it goes down during the night, that would be an alarm, because it's a hazard for you to sleep in your pocket of CO2. You could suffocate yourself, worst case. So part of those things that make life on the ISS a bit different from on Earth.
So how do you sleep? Do you lie down? Do you stand up? Do you float? What happens? Do you get an individual bed?
We've got some bunks, some crew quarters. There's like telephone booth size for those of us who remember telephone booth.
Yes, I remember.
They don't exist anymore, I believe.
Not small cellular phones.
Yes, no, the big one.
I remember the London booths.
Exactly.
Those kind of booths.
So you have your bedroom, and so you stick your sleeping bag on the wall pretty much. But you could sleep anywhere on the space station. You could sleep on the floor. You can sleep, upside down. You just need a bungee to bungee you against the wall, and then you'll be fine. It takes some getting used to, because you have to really let go of all your articulations. Your head won't be resting against anything like it does on
So you don't need a pillow?
Well, some people do. Some people even tape their pillow around their heads to get the feeling of their heads against the pillow, but you don't have to. It's actually an exercise in relaxation. If you can relax, then you'll have a good night. If you can't, then you gotta be very stiff and sometimes have a headache or things like that.
Maybe do yoga.
You could do yoga. Some people have done stretching, but it's difficult also to stretch on the space station, because if you think of it, you're also using your weight or gravity to stretch most of the time. But there's been some techniques using handrails, sticking your feet, doing stretching, and some people have been successful doing this too.
Is it difficult to be in microgravity conditions?
No, it's actually, it's not, I wouldn't describe being in microgravity conditions as difficult. It's just different. You have to unlearn and relearn what you were doing. But then, on the other hand, it gives you some extra freedom that you don't have most of the time. On the ground, if I have to work on a device that's on the wall, then I have no choice. That's the only access I have. On a space station, I can go position myself on the ceiling, and maybe I'll be in a better position. I've got more lever arm to do whatever mechanical operation I'm supposed to do. So actually, I've enjoyed it very much. It's you have to relearn some stuff, but it also gives you new possibilities that you don't have. It's like superpowers.
Did you look at India from space, and how did it look like?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact. I tried to, everything that's between plus 53 degrees of latitude and minus 53 approximately, then you're gonna overfly. So India falls into those
between
limits.
that.
Absolutely. So I took several pictures. I took Bangalore at night. I took Mumbai. I took even pictures of the day, the mountains in the north. A lot of different pictures. It looks great. It's actually much bigger than you think because as you know, for the maps, the projection doesn't do its justice. It's too
Cartographic way of putting it together.
So when you actually see the globe, then you see how vast it is. But the good thing is, on the space station, after some amount of time, you start learning the planet by heart, and just by looking outside, you know where you are, which is not that easy initially because there's nothing that looks more like a mountain than another mountain seen from 400 kilometers away. Nothing that looks more like a desert than another desert. But after some times, you understand and you recognize the differences in color, in shapes between the Australian desert, which has shades of red, sometimes black, even purple, and the Sahara, which is much more yellow, ochre, orange, those colors. And then once you get into that rhythm, then it's really, really fun to stick your head out, at the window, and then look at what's below.
While you were looking out of the cupola, did you find any extraterrestrial life, and did you look for them?
I didn't specifically look, but we didn't find anything. Within the vicinity of the Earth, you talk about life on other planetary surfaces, which is actually a likely scenario. Some bacteria, some other form of life, probably very different from what we imagine, Martians or something similar to humans could be. But that's a reasonable scenario. But in the vicinity of Earth, 400 kilometers is very close, so nothing special. There was once I saw...
So you didn't get flying saucers going past the cupola?
No, unfortunately not. It would have been quite a shock, I think, in the news if we had. But no, we didn't.
You didn't see them. Now, there are plans that there should be permanent habitation on the moon, and the Americans are working towards that. Is that a good idea?
I think it's a good idea. I think it would be similar it depends what are the goals, right? What's the finality of all of it? I think if it's for research and understanding, it's actually a good idea. We have scientific stations in Antarctica. We have scientific stations, scientific ships. We have all kinds of very remote, very isolated, in extreme environments, scientific installations, and that gives us tons of knowledge about the climate, other things, the history of the Earth, geology, biodiversity, you name it. So having such a station for research purposes on the moon would be great. It would be actually very similar as what they're doing in Antarctica. I was in Antarctica 2 years ago, and it just struck me how similar it would be living on the moon and living there. So that would be a ton of fun. You have to find the resources, you have to find water, you need power, energy, but all this we can figure out. And then you need obviously a reliable way to get there and come back.
Now, Elon Musk and President Trump want to go to Mars. And Elon Musk actually wants to go and stay there. Is that too risky a venture? And should humanity go and live in another planet?
I think we're nowhere near seeing a vast number of people going to Mars right now. If you want an analogy, it's like at the beginning of planes and aeronautics. You have to cross the English Channel between France and England. Then you have to cross maybe the Mediterranean, which is much smaller. And then one day you cross the Atlantic. And so right now, I think going to the moon is kind of crossing the Mediterranean or crossing the English Channel. And then one day we'll be able to cross the Atlantic, which is go to Mars. But right now, that's not something we're in a good shape to do. We kind of know which problems we have to solve. We're working on it. But I think the first step is go to the moon, being able to live there, to figure out the resources, go there and come back, land on the moon, come back to Earth. Those problems we have to solve to be in a position to go to Mars. So it's going to take a few more years, if not many more years, before we're in a position to go to Mars. And it's going to be science crew, exploration crew, not vast numbers of people at the beginning.
Now, if you have to go to Mars and you have to have permanent habitation, you need procreation. And if you have to have procreation, you need to have sex. And how do you have sex in space?
I think the exact same way as you have sex on the ground. There's no difference in nature. Again, it's like all the rest. You need to figure it out, but I think people
learn.
Well, I think people are always smart enough to learn how to do this. It's never a problem, it seems.
Now, when you come back, and you came back on, let's talk of the Crew Dragon Crew Dragon experience, because that's what Group Captain Shukla will be using. How difficult is it on re-entry?
Re-entry is challenging, especially if you've spent a long time in space, because you're deconditioned, right? You haven't used your muscles, you haven't used your bones for a long time because of weightlessness. So you come back and you're experiencing the G-forces, the acceleration, or rather the deceleration, that's going to compress you and shake you. And you haven't experienced anything like this on your body for a long period of time. So that's difficult. For a shorter mission, and if you're well trained when you leave, I think you'll be in a better shape when you come back. So it will be fine, no doubt. But nevertheless, it's strong deceleration. It's 5.5 Gs, which is not much maybe for a fighter pilot, but it's over extended periods of time. It's for many minutes at a time, not just a few seconds as you maneuver, but really for a long period of time. So you have to brace yourself. You have to block your lungs in a high position to be able to keep breathing. And also the capsule is going to be very, very hot because the re-entry creates thermal friction against the air.
Almost 6,000 degrees outside.
Absolutely. You're turning into a fireball, which you can see from the inside. It's actually fun. You look out the window, you see the flames. You're the fireball. But the result is it's very, very warm inside of the capsule. So all this makes it very, very dynamic again. And then
Can you hear something inside?
You can't really hear anything. I mean, especially you're wearing your spacesuit, you get hearing protection, you hear your engines firing, you hear the communication, but you can't hear what's happening outside of the capsule because there's no air, at least at the beginning. And then the last steps are really opening the parachute, which is also very dynamic. It's a bit of a violent shock opening and then being thrown around. And then impacting either the water for the Crew Dragon or the ground for the Soyuz, which is also like a small car crash, but you're also in a protective seat cushion, so you'll be fine.
Is the SpaceX suit comfortable? Because it's 21st century?
It is comfortable, but I'll say that it's also, they make it very, very form-fitting, very tight, because also they want things to look good, which why not? But in a way, the Soyuz is more baggy, or the space shuttle, the orange suit is more baggy, so it maybe doesn't look as good, but it's easier to put on. And that's also something you want, because in an emergency, that spacesuit is going to protect you from the fire, it's going to protect you from the depressurization. So that's something you want to be able to jump in and then button up as soon as possible. With the SpaceX spacesuit, it looks better. It's actually very functional, but it's also harder to put on. So that's the only limitation I would make.
Now, any message for Group Captain Shukla, who's going to fly soon?
Oh man, I wish I was in his shoes, obviously, because every space mission, it's more often than not, it's the culmination of a dream. And it's a culmination of so much work, so many years of training, work for all the engineers, for everybody, but also for the crew, obviously. So I would tell him, man, make sure you enjoy everything, because it lasts only a few days. It goes by so fast. Even for myself, the 400 days on orbit, I barely have memories because that's how fast it goes. And I'm so thankful that I took a ton of pictures, because at least now I can look at them and remember fondly that time. But it goes too fast, and it's hard for the brain to really imprint what's going on, because it's so different. The way to move is different, everything is different. So it's like in a dream. And just like a dream, sometimes it's hard to remember when you wake up in the morning. So it's a bit of the same experience. So try to consciously make yourself some memories, because that's the adventure of a lifetime.
When you come back to Earth, after being in space as an astronaut, is there a psychological shock because you suddenly become a hero and a person who's being chased for everything in life? Is that a shock?
I think there's some readaptation, right? And again, if you've been away for a long time, interacting with the same persons, then suddenly you get back to real life, and then the social aspect of this is challenging. I remember 3 days after my first mission, I was driving my car in a traffic jam, and then I thought, who are all these people? What are we doing here? It was such a strange experience to be in a traffic jam just after 6 months in space. But I think, there's also the aspect of now people might recognize you, might ask you things, but again, you're trying to deal with it. You get some support from the agency. It's part of the job, but that's something that's hard to anticipate, and that's something you can't really train for. But then I think what's important is go back to the people you know, right? Your loved ones and all. Those are the ones that are going to keep you grounded, keep you stable, and that's very, very important.
Is it hard to learn to keep the glass down and not leave it water of glass down because it'll drop when you come back and break?
No,
How many glasses did you break?
I didn't break any. I'm not sure it ever happened. I've heard this story many times, but I've never seen it. So maybe it's an urban legend. I don't know. I guess we'll have to check with Shooks. But for myself, no, I never dropped down the glass. What could happen is sometimes I remember the first morning, waking up on the ground, I would just slowly push on the bed, and I was shocked because nothing was happening. On space station, you slowly push on the wall, and then you propel yourself towards the other end of the space station. But the first morning, I was like, oh, what's going on? It's not working. And then I realized, oh no, I'm on Earth. And same with the first shower, same with at the beginning. But we're born and raised on Earth. We evolved on Earth, so it comes back very fast because it's thousands of years of evolution that have engraved in your brain how to live on Earth. It's much faster to be reused to life on Earth than it is to be used to life in space.
Any message for Indians as they prepare for an astronaut to go up? Because the public also needs to learn so many things that they are sending an Indian, one in 1.4 billion people to go up.
Yeah, I mean, same advice. Like, try to be part of it. I know that Israel will open the door to student challenges for science, or maybe a mission naming contest, or maybe drawing the patch of the mission. All those are opportunities to be part of the mission, because the point is that everybody kind of travels along, right? You can live your own adventure, but I think it's all of us, we like to make it a little bit bigger and to include others. If you want to be the ambassadors of a country, the ambassadors of Earth, the ambassadors of humankind, all those big lofty words, then you have to make sure that you're including other people. So, try to be part of it, follow the mission, and Shooks is going to share the mission. I'm sure Israel is going to share the mission, and and then apply to the selection. There's going to be a next selection. There's going to be a long line of Indian astronauts.
And India has their own human space flight program,
Absolutely.
so there will be more astronauts from India flying on an Indian rocket to space.
And that's going to be
exciting.
exciting.
Are you excited about that?
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's going to be a huge national pride for India. Very few countries have been able to do this worldwide. So
only three have done that. So fourth would be India to independent.
It's big. It's huge. And the day it happens, I know the whole world is going to be there cheering, and I know the 1.4 billion Indians are going to be cheering very, very loud.
So you're happy after your space mission?
I'm happy. Yeah, I'm actually very happy. It's a ton of work. It's a lot that you invest. For me, 7 years for my first mission and 4 more years for my second mission. So it's a lot of dedication, a lot of sacrifices. Sometimes you doubt. Sometimes you're like, wouldn't I be better off doing something else? Because it's always very uncertain. You never know. 7 years in advance, something can happen, right? And then things change. Technical problem, medical problem, anything could happen that prevents you from flying. So it's a big bet on the future, but when it works, then you're very happy.
Thanks a lot for speaking to me, Thomas.
Absolute pleasure.
Always a pleasure learning from you about life in space and microgravity. And last time we talked, we had great fun. We spoke about India, France. Today it was all about living in space. Thanks a lot. So that was astronaut Thomas Pesquet, who spent more than a year totally in space, long duration flights, but says he's very happy after his mission. A lot of investment on a personal level, but great investment and great payoff. In New Delhi, Pallava, Bagla for NDTV.